Jenny Duggan from Coventry City Council, and I'm the lead for private work in Coventry and Warwickshire. My two colleagues are also on the call, Sharon Naylor and I believe Anita Roden is there as well. You can put your camera on, wave. Just a few housekeeping points before we start. If I can ask that you turn your cameras and your microphones off whilst Caroline and Stefan are speaking. They have asked that if you have got any questions, if you can save them for the end and then sort of put your hand up or put something in the chat, and then that'll be picked up. The whole session is being recorded, so for those, I know we had a gentleman did ask earlier on whether it's being recorded they wanted to share with others. It is being recorded, and for those people that complete our evaluation form, which Sharon will send out at the end of this webinar, we will then forward that to you. We do also put the recording on both the LinkedIn group, so if you're not a member of our LinkedIn group, please, if Sharon, if you could put the link in the chat, and if people aren't members then they can join that. We've also got a Facebook page which we do put it on there as well, so but if you can fill in the evaluation form, it's very helpful to us to know then what are the topics around the Thrive at Work agenda that you're really particularly interested in having information on. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Caroline and Stefan from Core Clinics, who are going to deliver this back pain in the workplace webinar for us. Incidentally, just quickly, our next one is on the 24th of March, if you want to make a note of that, and that will be on stress risk assessments. So it is an area that a lot of people do struggle with. Hopefully by the time you finish this webinar, you'll all have lots of evidence to upload and put onto your Thrive at Work portal, and lots of information to take back into the workplace. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Caroline. Thank you very much.
Hello, so I'm Caroline. I'm a chiropractor at Core Clinics. My colleague Stefan, he's a very, very busy man, and he is with a patient right now. He said he'll be on ASAP, but if anyone knows him, we know that he's always very, very busy. So yeah, he'll be on shortly, and he'll say hello when he gets on. All right, so I'm so glad that so many of you are interested in this webinar about back pain in the workplace. The popularity is most likely due to, how much back pain is actually affecting businesses, not only in the UK, but worldwide, in fact. I'm sure you're not just here because you want to hear me talk for about an hour. Oh, I think Stefan's coming in now. Hello, Stefan.
Hello, hello. Sorry for the late entry. I like to make a dramatic entry.
It's absolutely fine. No, so I was just starting off just saying, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Hello, everybody. Lovely to meet you all. Number 24,
okay, so do you want to mute yourself because there's a bit of feedback?
Is that from me? Hang on, I'll switch my camera.
Okay, perfect. All right. So yeah, so we know that back pain is affecting businesses, not only in the UK, but everywhere. I know there'll be a lot of questions that come up during the presentation. As we said, just note them down, and we'll do questions at the end. And actually, if you start writing them down in the chat, maybe 30 minutes in, actually, Sharon, could you let me know when it's been 30 minutes so that I can check that actually?
Yeah, of course I can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So anyway, I really hope this is educational, somewhat entertaining, but most importantly, helpful. We'll make sure that you do get the slides at the end so you can look back over anything. And if you have any questions, of course, note them down. All right, so let's get into the presentation. So as you may know, back pain is a complex problem. So let's look at the size of it. So surprisingly to most, back pain is a very prevalent issue. So as you can see from these statistics, a lot of people will have some sort of back pain in their lifetime, with low back pain being the leading cause of disability in 160 countries. Most likely you've either had it already or have heard people complain of their own back pain. So much so that unfortunately back pain has become almost normalized as, just a part of life, something that everyone will get eventually, but it doesn't have to be that way. So it's quite common for us to hear someone say, oh, it's just my age, and that they think that as you get older, it's inevitable that you will get back pain, and that's just not the case. the amount of patients that come in and have told me, oh yeah, you know, I've got shoulder pain, and I ask, you know, do you get any low back pain or anything? And they say, no, just my normal backaches and stiffness, you know, we all get when we're old. And actually, you know, no pain is normal pain. So now, the fact that 1 in 6 people in England have back pain is obviously not ideal. Don't worry, it's not because we have weak backs or are doing something awful compared to everyone else. There's nothing particularly wrong with your workplace in particular. It is a worldwide problem. And when Elon Musk puts this on Mars, it's going to be an intergalactic problem. So don't feel bad about it happening in your company. All right, so back pain has been a recognized issue for a very, very long time. There are records from ancient times, but shockingly, the reality is we've only really studied it since at least 1990, and we still haven't succeeded in decreasing the public burden. You know, it makes you think, why has it been so difficult to solve this problem? Now, I've obviously done a lot of thinking into this area of expertise, and back pain is a very complicated issue when you look at it from the outside. But today, I'm going to try and show you how simple it can be and hopefully help it all make sense. So, how does this effect work? As I'm sure you know already, there are many working days lost due to back pain, which leads to frustration for both employers and employees. Here, I've given you a list of industries that are associated with high levels of musculoskeletal pain, but to put it simply, it affects desk workers, drivers, and manual labourers mainly. Most likely, this is due to the nature of their jobs as either being immobile and sedentary, or using their muscles in a way that puts pressure on specific parts of their body, but I'll talk more about that later in the webinar. But to be honest, even though there is a bias towards blaming these jobs for back pain, NHS healthcare workers are no better, with 40% of them taking time off work in 2015 due to musculoskeletal pain. So ironically, they get it too. They get it just as bad. So no wonder, you know, this is so important to talk about. And actually, I want to just thank Thrive at Work for doing this, because, you know, it's so important that everyone knows about how prevalent this issue is and how it can actually be sorted. So again, thank you so much for putting this on. Anyway, so between you and me, a lot of healthcare workers don't know all there is to know about back pain and don't know what's best to do. And to make matters worse, you may have heard of the acronym RICE, which is Rest, Ice, Compress, and Elevate. So this has been used for years for anything and everything that causes aches and pains. But after reviewing this for years, we actually know now that this can be the worst thing you can do unless you've broken something. There are still misconceptions about, you know, what's best to do in certain situations, and there's mixed information out there. So nowadays, there's a new acronym. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's MEAT. So it's movement, exercise, analgesics, and treatment. So the more you move a joint while it's healing, the better it heals. And that's why analgesics are part of the acronym, because if you are in pain, then you tend not to move the joint as you worry about hurting yourself. And with any injury, it's important to find someone, you know, like an expert in their field who can actually help you get better without hurting yourself further. And, you know, someone who can give you a definitive answer about what you can and can't do in terms of treatment and activities. Okay, so let's talk about the costs. So it's estimated that about 12.5% of all work accidents in the UK is from back pain. The cost to UK businesses is extortionate. And when this is something that could be potentially prevented, it's a cost that doesn't have to be made. So it's not a surprise that businesses want to prevent back pain in the first place, hence why you're here today. So on average, a person with back pain takes around 13 days off a year, which is expensive when you take into account, you know, the cost of sick pay, the cost of reduced productivity, the cost of someone getting out of practice at work. I mean, I'm sure you've had a holiday or time off work and when you get back, it takes you a minute to adjust to working life again and getting back to the swing of things. So yeah, it does affect a lot. And the loss in money and productivity can lead to a lot of frustration in the workplace, again, for both the employer and employee. Now, I'm going to try and simplify the complex nature of back pain for you. Okay, so We know back pain is common, we know it's expensive, and it's having a massive effect on society. So how are we going to fix it? So there are two realms of back pain which are important to know: the etiology and the presentation. So the etiology, or the cause, so that could be a trauma, that could be mental health, nutrition, or a combination of factors, and how the cause expresses or presents itself. So you may know this as pain. So, where does it hurt? What structures are affected? How does it hurt? How much does it hurt? How long for? What other issues does it cause? Things like that. So those are the two realms: the cause and the presentation. As a population, we're so used to covering up how the cause expresses itself with painkillers, and less of the focus seems to be on finding the cause of the pain to actually stop it. Also, another thought: is a herniated disc a cause, or is it the cause of something expressing itself? So a herniated disc is a diagnosis telling us what structure is involved. Anyone can diagnose someone. Anyone can find out, what structure is affected. That's easy. That's not the issue here. It's what actually caused the diagnosis that we need to find. Okay, so we need to know why this diagnosis happened in the first place. Now that is important. So moving on, what doesn't cause back pain? Now I wanted to do this because I wanted to do some myth busting. Okay, so the first one is getting older. You can see that happy old couple there. Yes, they do not have back pain. And yes, contrary to popular belief, musculoskeletal problems are not an inevitable part of aging. So statistic-wise, back pain actually peaks between around 30 and 50 years of age. So this is completely miscommunicated. To be honest, it all depends on your lifestyle and how you treat your body and yourself. So no, just because you're getting older doesn't mean that, yes, exactly. Yeah, that's your excuse out the window. Exactly. Right. So the second one I really wanted to bring to light here is picking up papers or something, picking up something from the floor. People often say that, oh, I put my back out picking something up off the floor, but that's not enough to actually cause an injury. If you said to me you were in a car accident and you had a whiplash injury, a muscle strain, then that would make a bit more sense. But getting hurt from lifting something up, no, that there must be something underlying. It could be, poor movement patterns or inflammation or something with anxiety. I'll get more into that later though. So yes, just going to pick something up, that shouldn't cause back pain. The third one I want you to know is about having, a fragile or misaligned spine, or, seeing an MRI that shows degeneration. That does not mean you'll get back pain. It has been researched so much that there is no correlation between degeneration or wear and tear of the spine and pain levels. So you can have a scary looking MRI, I mean scary, with no pain or problems. And you can have what seems to be a normal spine and have excruciating pain. So yeah, there is no correlation at all. And it may surprise you to know that when we reach 30, we all have spinal degeneration and wear and tear. Okay, it starts when you're 30, it goes downhill from there, I'm afraid. All right, so the last one is that if you have severe pain, that you have a severe or serious problem. No, that's not true either, because surprisingly, this is rarely the case. And you can have pain that feels excruciating with a fairly simple problem, and vice versa. So you can have minor pain with a more sinister problem. So there is no correlation between how severe your pain is and how severe the problem is, if you see what I mean. Okay, so let's move on to what actually causes pain. So let's start on, so we're clear, pain and pain are entirely different things. Okay, so pain number one is from trauma, injury, or biomechanical issue. Pain number two is from a physiological process in the body. Okay, number 3 is from a mental health issue. You can have back pain from purely one of these things. I'll go into more detail about these in a minute, but all of these causes are completely different, but they're all real problems in a person's life. Back pain can be caused by many different things, and one person's experience is completely different to another person's due to previous experiences and also their mental health at the time. Some people's pain tolerance is higher than the next person's. There's something called the pain gate theory. Now, I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's basically where different problems in a person's life causes their brain to feel more or less pain, and it all depends on your mental state. For example, if you are stressed, inactive, and focusing on the pain and how awful it is, your pain levels will feel higher than if you were relaxed, active, and happy. That's where mental health can have a huge effect on back pain. Maybe you have experienced having more back pain or shoulder pain when you're stressed or unhappy, and that will be why. Anyway, the most important part of fixing back pain is getting to the root cause. So what is confusing about back pain is that back pain is caused by loads of different things, and back pain can be expressed in many different ways with many different types of presentation. Now, it really gets interesting when we start talking about the comorbidities, which can complicate the matter further. And these are basically disorders which make the healing process slower. So obesity, diabetes, depression, things of that nature, they just make our job take a little bit longer. That's all. So let's dive into the 3 main causes of back pain. All right, we're going to start with biomechanics. So biomechanics includes the structure and function of a person and how all of these structures interact together to create movement. Similar to a machine in that every cog and pulley acts together to create a smooth system. But if there is a rusty cog or a weak pulley or a cog isn't in the right shape for the machine or something like that, the system won't run as smoothly. So with the body, if there is more pressure on one part of the body compared to the other due to, a leg length difference or an orthotic need or a muscle imbalance, then that area with more pressure is more likely to get injured. That causes a pain response and can lead to other structures being affected, like a nerve. So I'm sure you've heard of sciatica. This is where the sciatic nerve that runs down the leg is irritated by something and it causes shooting pain down the leg. This is a great example of an injury in one area causing pain in another. Okay, so there are 2 parts of biomechanics that I want to talk about that cause back pain. All right, so first, there's a trauma which warrants an injury, like a serious fall or an accident. It makes sense to have an injury in an area if there's significant trauma, like a rugby game or falling off a horse. I mentioned this earlier, with the whiplash, or something that doesn't warrant an injury, which I said before with the myth busting. This is when you've done something a million times before, all of a sudden it causes an injury. A typical case we see in clinic is someone picking up a shoe and something very light from the floor that causes them to be in serious agony. Okay, so 2.5 million years of evolution and your disc can't withstand picking up a newspaper. How ridiculous does that sound? The concept that a patient needs to be wrapped in cotton wool is wrong, but at the same time, we do need to know what's going on in the body that would cause such an issue with such a minor injury. So you should be able to pick up simple things without a problem. It shouldn't be an issue. But when it does happen, we know that there's a long history of biomechanical issues, which has inevitably finally taken its toll on the body. So if I give you an example I like to use with patients. So we all have a cam belt in our cars, which goes round and round, and it regulates the engine parts. So there's a lot of pressure on this belt. So as time goes on, it starts to wear. But the important part is that it's still usable and it's not causing a problem. You can ignore when a belt whines and screams, but it's worth getting it checked by a professional. You shouldn't ignore the warning signs. But let's continue. So the car continues to work and it does its job for a while. If it's not checked, it will eventually tear or break. So even though it has driven many times before without an issue, This is a similar issue for our backs when we have more pressure on one side of the vertebra than the other, causing the disc to weaken on one side and eventually herniate, causing what you know as a slipped disc. Now, we actually know that discs don't actually slip out, but that's a story for another day. So anyway, the concept of back pain can be complicated. And if there's any uncertainty around the cause, then that's where I would come in. As a chiropractor, I look for the cause and I tell the patient where to go to, sort themselves out, whether that's with me, with a sports therapist, or so on. Okay, so let's move on to the physiology. This is another really interesting concept in that to the untrained eye, it can be harder to spot as a cause of back pain. So, for example, different organs can cause pain that feels biomechanical, like kidney issues that can cause low back pain, liver issues can cause right shoulder pain, heart issues can cause pain down the left arm, so on. So these are easily mistaken as muscular aches and pains, but to tell the difference between whether the pain is originating from the mechanical structures or from the organs comes down to the signs and symptoms with it. So kidney problems may cause other issues like pain when urinating, or a difference in your urine contents, that kind of thing. And if you have a kidney infection, you may get a temperature with that too. With a liver problem, yes, you may get right shoulder pain, but also yellowing of the skin. So it's all to do with knowing what factors to look for to rule out these problems. Other disease processes can be due to diet or lifestyle, a deficiency in something, or a disorder that you were born with or have developed. For example, rheumatoid arthritis. It causes swelling and inflammation in the joints, especially in the hands, which needs medication as soon as possible to stop the inflammation from getting worse. These are not painkillers, but they're specific medications for rheumatoid arthritis. We also know that eating a lot of carbohydrates is linked to back pain because they are pro-inflammatory. And did you know that also having a vitamin D deficiency can cause muscle aches and tiredness? Actually, Stefan, you know a bit more about vitamin D deficiencies?
Yeah. Shall I touch on that now? Oh, Jerry, you're having problems seeing the slides, you say in the chat. Keep getting a message. Is anybody else having problems seeing the slides? Thank you, Seema. Sorry, Jerry. Okay. Thank you, Jerry. So on that, Caroline, there's the wider context of inflammatory status full stop that you touched on. And I think one of the aspects of physiology is obviously the disease process that Caroline touched on. But there's also the other aspect, which is this generalized inflammatory status. And as Caroline says, there are certain foods that are definitely more pro-inflammatory than others, namely carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates, sugars, alcohols, starch-based foods. They do tend to have a strong inflammatory response. So then on the other side of inflammatory foods, you have the non or anti-inflammatory foods. And one of the key components in there are your fish oils, and everybody knows about cod liver oil and omega oil, etc. But one of the side ones is actually vitamin D, as Caroline points out. So at this time of year, most people are technically vitamin D deficient. It can be linked to mood disorders. It can be linked to changes in skin, muscular density, even things like your hair, your nails, etc. But there is also a very strong role of anti-inflammatory role of vitamin D that it suppresses and reduces your pain experience. And one of the things that there's a lot of literature around vitamin D, but the main issue is that the dosages are problematically low at the moment, and we need to really be looking at maintenance doses that are on the higher end, 4,000 or 5,000 IU a day. I'll touch on that a little bit later again, but the other thing also to mention at this point within the physiology and the issues that we can experience back pain wise is issues around menopause and andropause, so the male menopause as well, which again can have a significant impact. Would you like me to expand further on the vitamin D issue, Caroline, now or later?
We'll do that later because there's more on that later.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff. Just mute Stefan. You were echoing, sorry. Okay, so yeah, the thing is, people can have, a disease process or a problem with their physiology and a biomechanical issue, which is causing their back pain. So that's when it gets a bit tricky, but we're trained to look out for this. Okay, so yeah, people can have two things at once or more. So yeah, what's wonderful is we have the internet at our disposal to find out what's causing our issue, but that is a curse, because I'm sure you've all experienced, Google seems to always predict the worst case scenario. So again, if you're unsure, please see help, see someone, okay? So we're moving on to, mental health. All right, oh, it's not, there we go. Okay, so the last contributor to our back pain that I'm going to speak about today. All right, so, thank you, Sharon. All right, so mental health. This is, in my opinion, the most important factor that leads to increased pain, which is often ignored, okay? So there seems to still be a stigma behind mental health and its effects on pain. You don't have to have a traumatic experience like, a death of a loved one or something like that to have mental health issues. It's often forgotten. And when people do feel anxious or stressed, they usually try to ignore it, or they're in denial because they haven't been through a massive trauma. And this is something, we're really trying to work at CORE, and we're trying to normalize talking therapies and, mental health advice as part of our treatment protocols, because we realize how important it is. So mental health and physical health go hand in hand always. One will always cause the other. So, if the pain you're in is stopping you from doing the things you want to do, like pick up your children or play your favorite sport, this will cause you to feel unhappy and low. And as I mentioned earlier with, the pain gate theory, your mental state will affect the level of pain you experience. Have you ever noticed that when you're stressed, you hold it in your shoulders? And did you know it's not normal to have tension in your shoulders? Have a feel of the top of your shoulders, and the majority of us actually do have tension there. Now, yes, this could be postural stress, could be, but most likely it's due to stress. It's a common problem that we do see, and it's all to do with our fight or flight mechanisms. So you may know of this inbuilt ability, okay, so where we prepare to fight or flight. So let me explain. When we see a threat, like a tiger in front of us, our body subconsciously knows to react and either fight the tiger or run away. So to prepare for this, our muscles tense up in anticipation, which is great if we're in that situation. That's fantastic. But you may be wondering why I have a cat on the screen. And it's not just because I like cats. They are great, but it is a great example of tensing our muscles to prepare to fight or run away. You may have seen when cats, when they perceive a threat, they arch their backs. We do exactly the same thing. But the difference is our brain can't tell the difference between whether a tiger is in front of us and about to eat us, or a spreadsheet or a deadline. And this causes a lot of tension to build up in our muscles. And therefore, it leads to pain. And it can lead to tension headaches even, but headaches for another time. But from another perspective, the way you feel will have a huge effect on how you treat yourself and how you treat your body. How you nurture it, how you move it, how you feed it. I mean, who hasn't had a food binge when you're feeling down to make yourself feel better? If you're feeling low, then you're less likely to do things that are good for you. Moving on. At the end of the day, there is a lot of overlap between all of these causes. For example, if you're stressed because of your work, your personal life, your kids are driving you crazy, then you may find that you're eating more unhealthy foods. You're not exercising as much, sitting on the sofa more. And if this is the case, you may increase your risk of diabetes and kidney issues, as well as putting more pressure on different parts of your spine and therefore causing pain and discomfort. It makes it difficult to do the activities you want to be able to do, it makes you sad and so on. So you can see it's very easy to snowball into many, many other issues, creating an endless cycle, okay? So workplace absence. So we know the main cause of back pain now, but employers need to know the difference between an injury, a chronic problem, or whether they're malingering. Now, the majority of the time, there is actually an issue with the employee, but I'm sure you've witnessed someone, pulling a fast one just to get out of work, unfortunately. So this is really unfortunate because people have used it as an excuse in the past, and it can create distrust and tension between employers and employees. This distrust can prevent the employer from getting to the root cause because of their skepticism. It also can make the employee feel like no one will believe them and that they're being judged. This is an environment which can cause issues. So to prevent this from becoming, a tense and untrusting relationship, it's so important to create a safe space in the workplace where employees can have honest conversations about what's really, what's going on. This will also help the mental aspect of their pain as well, because, they likely feel guilty or embarrassed that they have to be off work because of their back. Many patients I have, and they feel like they're going crazy. They feel like, they're not being listened to because it's so silly, that they have this back pain. Don't just assume that they're lying because, or trying to get out of work because of laziness or anything like that. Most likely there is something going on, whether that is back pain or having issues at home or other personal struggles. So we need to figure out why that's happening there. So how to prevent back pain at work? To be honest with you, what is most important is that people feel like they are in control of their environment. This means, scheduling their time, creating a clear structure when they go to work, when they're going to wake up, when they have their breaks. We know that research has shown us actually that feeling like we are in control will make people a lot more productive and happier. Remote working from home, in a sense, gives them more control of the environment, but actually this brings about other challenges and, more distractions, not leaving the house for long periods of time, not actually scheduling their time, blurring the lines between work and home life, things like that. Also, having frequent breaks is very important. A trend that I've seen a lot with my patients is that they're more likely to work without a break for hours so that they can spend more time with their family in the afternoon or evening. I don't know if this relates to you or anything, but I've seen that a lot. It may seem like a good idea at the time, but actually it does take a toll on the body, physically and mentally. I'm sure you all have had your ergonomic assessments and have heard about how to set up a desk and how to lift things safely. So I will be brief on this. I do have a slide after this actually, just in case, because you're going to be given the slides, you can have a look at that if you want to. But I'm sure you've all heard about ergonomic chairs and desks, but maybe you're not sure what to get. To be honest, everyone has different needs, so it can be really hard to please everyone. The most important things to remember are that your hips should be higher than your knees, feet flat on the floor or a stool if you've got short legs like me, with your screen at a decent height in front of you. Then you can build around that depending on the person's needs. There's actually no ideal sitting posture, and you shouldn't be in one position for more than half an hour at a time anyway. So it's important to move when you can. Sit to stand desks help because they allow for changes in position as you work, so that's quite good as well. If you can imagine, if you wrapped your elbow, okay, we've got an elbow here. If we wrapped it up so it didn't move, let's say we did that for a week, and then you let go, and then your elbow would start to seize up and movement would be more difficult, maybe even painful. So this is because joint movement helps more fluid go into the joint and it keeps the flexibility maintained. You can compare this to the cogs in a machine. So if they aren't being used very often, they get stiffer and you may need to oil them up to get them moving better. If we're sitting in one position for prolonged periods of time, over a few months or years, then this tension is going to build up in our joints and make us stiffer. I'm sure you've all experienced losing your flexibility as we get older, and this is most likely because we don't move our joints as much as when we did when we were younger. Whilst you're at work, you can also include stretches and exercises in your routine. Whether you could do this at the gym, you could do a sport of some kind, or simple home exercises, or you could even do it at your desk at work. So after this, I'm actually going to be giving you some stretches to do together. So look forward to that. But yeah, so that's the kind of thing you could be doing at work as well. Look, something really, really interesting is your brain is always figuring out where your joints are in space, and it never makes mistakes. So if you're slouching forward at a desk with your head forward, that's what your brain's actually telling you to do. You know, if you have tense shoulders, that's what your brain wants you to do. The brain wants the easy way out. And if you don't have, you know, if you don't have to use certain muscles that are weaker when you sit down, then it won't use them. And that's why you're finding it hard to remember to sit up straight all the time. I'm sure you're like, oh, yes, oh, I've got to go back up. And that's just because your brain is making you go forward, because that's so much easier. Yeah, it's much easier for your weaker muscles. You know, your weaker muscles are loving you for that. But the problem comes in when you do this for prolonged periods of time, and it puts a lot of pressure on the joints and the muscles. Your head is very heavy. The further forward it goes, the heavier it gets, especially for these poor muscles here. These muscles cause headaches as well. But yes, so it causes a lot of tension, and it can cause the muscles to tense up, and causing them to overwork, and it causes knots. It's so common to slouch with your head forward at work. So make sure, you know, you strengthen the right muscles. So if you go to someone who knows what they're talking about, make sure that, you know, they get you to strengthen the right muscles so that you can actually sit up straight and not worry about that, and then not put too much pressure on the spine. Now, I actually have a handy dandy spine right here, which I use for all of my patients because they love to see the anatomy. So what I'm going to show you is these joints here. If you can see my camera, these joints here are called facet joints. If they get inflamed, or if they, you know, get a bit tight or restricted, then this again is going to cause a lot of pain. And actually, we treat this day in, day out very well, actually. So that's pretty much what can happen when you slouch a lot, and that's why you get that pinching feeling at the back of your neck right here. It's these joints right here are the culprit. Okay, I'll put that back down. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide. We've been here for over half an hour now, so I know I can't see any of you, but whoever wants to join me, you don't have to. But if you'd like to, please feel free to do this with me. So first of all, stand up. Okay, so move your body around, just because we've been sat for such a long time. I'm sure we're all slouching over our laptops and our computers. Okay, so just kind of have a little bit of a stretch, a bit of a move around, you know, shake about a bit. I see you, Stefan. Great, good, perfect. Okay, so now what I want to do is I really want to give you some simple neck stretches that you can do in your workplace, you can do at home. It really helps with this slouch posture that we all have. Okay, so first of all, I want you to bring your neck to the side, bring the hand on the same side, across and over like this, and push a little bit, okay? You should be able to feel a stretch right there. Okay, I want you to hold this for up to 30 seconds. We'll only hold it for a few seconds this time, but only do this if it's comfortable. If it's not comfortable, then please stop, okay? So we hold this for a few more seconds. Perfect. And then I want you to slowly release, and we're going to do exactly the same on the other side, okay? So head to the side, hand on the head, and the weight of your hand pushing down. Again, you should feel the stretch on the side here. We'll hold that for a little bit too. These are big culprits when it comes to posture and headaches and pain in the neck. Okay, and then release that there. So the next one I want to do with you is to the side, same thing, but this time I want you to go to sniff your armpit, okay? So you're going to go down to your armpit there and push here, and you should feel it a bit further back this time, okay? Oh, no problem, Sharon. Oh, perfect. So just the back here, I want you to feel that stretch there. Okay, a few more seconds. Again, only do this if this is comfortable. Okay, and then release slowly. We're going to do the same on the other side. So to the side, sniff your armpit, and then put pressure on the back of the head there. Again, you should feel this at the back of the neck on the side there, okay? Remember, relax your shoulders. Lovely. Again, I want you to be able to hold that for up to 30 seconds. Now, this one is a bit more ugly. Okay, so I don't know if you want to do this with your colleagues unless you're comfortable with them, but we're going to do it now anyway. Okay, so this time I want you to tuck your chin in like this, so you give yourself a beautiful double chin. This is recorded, so everyone's going to see my double chin now. Okay, lovely. What I don't want you to do is I don't want you to do that. Okay, because a lot of patients, yes, exactly, Stefan. That's perfect. Yes, great. So don't bring your neck forward. You want to go back like Stefan, like that. Then relax your shoulders down. Okay. And then, like me, I want you to bring your arms out like that, okay? And I want you to imagine, no, out to the side, Stefan. Yeah, great. Great. And then I want you to imagine that there's a thread on the back of your head going up to the ceiling, okay? So you're giving yourself a beautiful double chin, and then you're stretching up to the ceiling. And what this does is it deactivates those tight muscles at the top, which will hopefully prevent knots and horrible trigger points. I'm sure if you've ever got a massage, it hurts up there. Well, this will help to prevent that. So again, hold that for 30 seconds. Even just when you notice that you're hunching over, you could just go, oh, I'm hunching. Okay, let's deactivate. Let's deactivate the shoulders. Let's do this. Okay, so do that as much as you can. All right. So make sure that you relay that to your colleagues as well, so that they can do that regularly to avoid getting the aches and pains up there. You could do this as part of the structure at work. Okay, so you can put it as structure at work. So every day before lunch, you could walk around, do these stretches. And this is just an idea that you could do to normalize doing these postural exercises at work, because sometimes people are a bit intimidated if it's just them doing it. So yeah, try and make it kind of a normal part of the culture of work. Right, I just wanted to put this in so you had an official ergonomic setup information page to refer back to when you need it. But I'm not going to go into it because, quite frankly, it's quite boring. So you can go back over that in your own time. Okay, so it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that the employees get the right support. Okay, the first part to this is helping them identify, prevent, self-manage and treat their condition. If they don't know what is wrong, then they can't get better effectively, most likely. Some conditions can be self-managed in relatively small ways, but others not so much, as I've already explained. Risk assessments, they're key to see what kind of issues there are at the workplace, and because some of these issues may worsen pre-existing conditions that a person may have, or issues that could, cause an injury. So that's why risk assessments are so important to do. There is a lot of information on the internet to help you with ergonomic advice, but make sure you don't go down the rabbit hole of, buying everything or trying to figure out everything that someone may need. So yeah, again, you can ask for advice for that as well. So what about if they work from home? Now, dare I talk about the pandemic that's been going on over the past few years? But I have something important to think about. So cast your minds back to the first lockdown. Everyone is panic buying. All non-essential businesses are closed and no one can leave unless it's essential. Everyone's schedule went out of the window. Since that moment, a lot of people, including me, turned into a couch potato. And mental health issues went through the roof. Do you see where I'm going with this? So this is why it's even more important now that you look out for your employees, because we've all been through a lot and it can manifest in so many ways. I want to give you a link to a checklist. Okay, so it's actually at the bottom of this slide. So when you do get the slides, do go back and do this. This would be really helpful. Yes, I want you to give this to your colleagues, and if you could fill out yourself, that would be amazing. But it's basically, we're conducting research on back pain at the workplace, and we would really appreciate it if you took part. If you could get them to just fill it in with the link, I'll share the data with you all so that you can all see the trends and what we need to improve on as a group as well. It's good for your company to see how employees are doing. And also, you're part of research, which is pretty awesome. All the areas of the questionnaire are very important and can predispose you to all sorts of pain. So having an office area at home is important. So if you are working from home, having an actual area to do your work is very important, not only for ergonomic reasons, but also to separate your work and your personal life. You know, I've heard so many times that people that are working from home are working on their bed with their laptop, which again isn't very good for your posture. You know, or lying on the sofa with the laptop. And so separating work life and personal life is so important for both, you know, productivity, your posture, and also so you can actually relax when you're at home as well. Something else that's in this checklist as well is allowing for breaks. I know I've already said about this, but you know, just even getting up to walk and get a drink, it makes a massive difference. Just being able to move, okay? So getting the right amount of sleep. Now, this is really interesting, and I think you will find this interesting. So sleep is obviously, we know, it's a very important aspect to health. You know, it gives your brain time to repair itself. It gives your body a rest. However, what you may not know is getting too much sleep is also an issue for your back. That may be surprising, but as we sleep, the discs in our back aren't under any pressure. And the fluid is absorbed into the discs overnight, okay, making them bigger. So during the day, the pressure on the discs makes them smaller, which this is completely normal and it's not a problem. This is why you're actually taller in the morning than you are in the evening. So if you ever want to measure your height, do it in the morning. But if you sleep for too long, your discs are still filling with fluid. So this can put pressure on your spine and the muscles around it and all the structures, and again, cause back pain. So you may have experienced back pain after having the flu or being in bed for a long time, and this is actually why, or it could be a reason, because these discs are just expanding. Now, moving on. Again, do they have support with their stress levels? I know I've said about mental health and how important it is, but yes, just make sure that, you know, they do have the support, you know, home support as well. You know, do they have a good support network, their friends, family, that kind of thing? Do they know where to go if they need help? If not, why? Because it's so important to communicate that with them about where they can get help from. Something else, you know, are you doing regular exercise? You know, getting your body moving? Are you eating well? You know, your employees may not know where to find information about this, and if you tell them about all these things to help with their lifestyle, then when they're ready, it will help them perform better as a team, and they will be happier. So you need to make sure your colleagues and employees know where to get information from, and you know who to talk to if they have any questions. If they don't know, then communicate that with them. Sorry. You know, have you got pathways to support that person? Okay, so if you could do that questionnaire, that would be amazing. So leading drivers of back pain. I just want to reiterate. So we know there are the three main drivers: biomechanical, physiological, and mental health. The most common thing that I see is biomechanical, but what is important to be aware of is the other causes so that we can fix the problem. When someone has an issue with their back, it's important that they see the correct person as quickly as possible. The quicker they get looked at, the quicker it will go away. It's much easier to fix something that someone has had for a week rather than if they've had it for 10 years. So who can help? Again, this comes back to what the cause of the pain is. If they have a muscle spasm, you know, you can send them for a few massages, they'll most likely be all right. If they've been under some stress recently, and maybe having a walk in the countryside to clear their mind may be enough, or using a mindfulness or self-care app may help. You know, if they've had a serious fall and they can't move their legs and they've got shooting pain, then maybe an ambulance is going to be more appropriate. If they have a chronic problem with their back, seeing a chiropractor, it all depends. It all depends on exactly what the cause is as to who can help. That's why it's a bit more confusing. Most importantly, you can help yourself. So again, I want you to try and help yourself first, and then if it doesn't help, that's when, you know, you can go to someone else as well. So, you know, keeping hydrated. I'm sure you've heard of all these things. Hydration is so important for all functions of the body, and it helps with your spinal disc health as well, because as you know, they fill with fluid, so that's good for your discs as well. And also, if you drink enough water, then it promotes healing as well. So it is important, and I'm sure you know about balanced diet. You know, Stefaan Vossen, he also touched on this as well. It's really, really important. You know, being healthy, keeping to a healthy weight. It also has its benefits with regards to back pain, any aches and pains, as there won't be too much pressure on the joints from weight. Then we said already about the caffeine, sugary drinks and alcohol as well, because they are pro-inflammatory. But we'll touch on this a bit more later. All right, so all of these things, and we've touched about vitamin D as well, getting a good night's sleep. Okay. Moving on, when to seek help. I just wanted to put this on. So, you know, if you are stuck and you don't know, obviously see someone. But I just want to give you a little bit of guidance. So, number one, if you've been stuck with back pain for more than 3 months, then there's something going on. And number two, if you've had 3 episodes or more in the last year that has lasted for 5 or more days, these could mean that there is something underlying going on, and it needs a professional opinion. Okay, to be honest, if your self-care doesn't seem to be working, there's no harm in getting it checked. So maintenance. Now, we've talked about fixing the issue when it's happened, but the key to reducing back pain is to prevent it in the first place. Now, it's like getting a checkup at the dentist or optician. You know you should do it to make sure there are no issues, but we don't always do it. And more often than not, we don't do anything until something bad happens. We are reactive creatures. The best maintenance patients are the ones who have experienced chronic back pain for 10 years or more, because they've experienced the pain and they don't want it to come back. We are only into preventative care when we know that we're going to have an issue. So that's why. And people who do preventative care have either experienced what happens without it or have a very high sense of self-worth. And the latter is what we want for our patients. So I know here I am talking about maintenance when we're mainly interested in fixing the pain when we have it. But I do know that when people do look after themselves, they don't end up in my office. So there has been research on this, and maintenance care is far more cost effective than trying to fix the problem. We can send this paper to you if you like. Just let us know. Let us know if you'd like us to send anything. Okay. So why don't we help ourselves more? Why are we so reactive? Well, we just are. Simply. Yeah, we can send that. Okay. It is hard to rewire our thoughts and behaviors as our brains work on reward mechanisms. Do something good, eat food, rest in bed, help your serotonin or happy hormone levels go up. Humans seek comfort. If someone values, staying on the sofa or sitting down more than exercise, they're less likely to do the exercise. Usually, time and money is a factor to looking after ourselves too, which sometimes can't be avoided, but there are always ways to help yourself. So at core, we do try to embrace the strategies to try and beat these inbuilt mechanisms, encourage patients to do their exercise, eat healthily, maintain their body so they can look after themselves and stay out of our offices really, and hopefully stay in yours. Okay. So, key messages. We know this anyway. So, low back pain is extremely common. That's why you're here. The leading drivers are biomechanics, physiological processes, and mental health. You can have one of those causing your back pain or all of them causing your back pain. And we've been through that a lot today. There is a huge association with lifestyle. Huge. We've talked about that today as well. Number 4, what you do to fix your back pain depends on the cause. It depends on the cause. So, like I've said before, if it's something that just needs a massage, then that's completely different than someone who needs A&E. And again, I just wanted to reiterate, if you've been stuck with back pain for more than 3 months or if you've had 3 episodes or more in the last year, lasting for 5 days or more, please seek help. But again, if you're ever concerned, ever worried, then there's no harm in getting a checkup anyway. Okay, so that's it for today. Oh, Stefan, did you want to say something else?
Nothing to add, but I'm very, very happy to help and support any questions that come up in the chat. I believe that we have a little bit of time left to do that, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
Just for everyone who's not looking at the chat, we will send all the slides and the links to the research that Caroline references all within that. And also, when you do receive the link to the questionnaire, please fill it in, and if you don't mind, actually share it with your colleagues far and wide, because the more information that we collect on that data platform, the more accurate we can feed back to you all about what the current state of affairs is. And just again, really reiterating what Caroline has been saying, back pain looks complicated. Back pain is a massive burden, both on the individual suffering with the back pain, but also on the dynamics in the workplace, in the family. You know, it is as common for people to come in and complain about the fact that they can't be comfortable and do the things that they need to be doing, as much as it is that it interferes with their personal life and their quality of life. And that is the space in which that we're trying to operate, and really looking at all the different aspects of why a person might be suffering or experiencing pain or some sense of disability is absolutely critical. And once you do that, as Caroline said, actually things that used to look very complicated become very, very simple. But we just need to approach it with honesty and integrity, and making sure that we differentiate between aspects of our overall health that are made up out of our aspects of our mental health, our physical health, and as Caroline said again, the physiological side of things as well. And once you do that, it actually becomes a lot more straightforward, a lot more easy to understand and remedy. But above all, we also want to instigate and make sure that everyone is confident in their body and trusts their body. So this is not a case of run to a therapist or seek help at the earliest situation, because your body is very good at dealing with injuries. Your body is great at dealing with problems. It injures all the time. It is really only when you are failing to do your normal activities, that you are failing to recover from an injury that really technically you should be recovering from. That's when we know that there's something else afoot. And that's when further investigations are required. But in the meanwhile, all these good habits, these exercise routines, good dietary habits, good mental health routines are all significant contributors to your ability to be well and stay well. So just to reiterate and support Caroline's presentation. I think that we can go on to the questions in the chat. So shall we start going through those? Thank you very much for your comments, by the way. That's very kind of everyone. We do know that it's a very complex subject, and one that we could really spend a lot more time on, breaking down further. But it's really about empowering as many of you to, understand that, when you have that feeling that somebody, it might not be physical, and that you might think, okay, there's more going on in their personal life. Well, there probably is. Or that you think, well, actually, that does feel and sound like a real injury. And again, that's probably exactly what's going on, but it is getting down to the bottom of it and making sure that no more additional time is wasted, no more resources are wasted, and above all, that there's no unnecessary suffering. So going to the questions, thank you, Jerry. Subject that you have spoken experience. Thank you very much. Question from Fiona on question 6, needs scale amending. Okay, Caroline, can we have a little look at that? The question there's a scaling issue. We'll just note that. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Anita. I'm not getting any question marks. Lots of lovely positive comments. Oh, there we go. Seema, you are, yes, about vitamin D. Yes, they can be. So there is a lot of conflicting, or there has been historically a lot of conflicting information around vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is, okay, there you go, Angela, who is my wife, by the way, who is watching as we are presenting. The vitamin D discussion is a really, really important one, but it sits amongst another pool of vitamin-based issues. But in the UK, from pretty much September through to March, April, you can stand outside stark naked and you will still not be able to produce enough vitamin D. Vitamin D is naturally produced by UV rays that are then converted into vitamin D through the skin. Now, the problem is that these UV rays, they need to come in at a certain angle in order for you to be able to actually produce vitamin D. Now, again, from September through to March, April in the UK, you cannot produce enough vitamin D. Now, half an hour out in the sunshine on a May, June day will produce up to 30,000 IU of vitamin D. I'm mentioning that simply because there is a misunderstanding around what constitutes a high dose of vitamin D. So you can very safely take 5, 6, even 10,000 IU every day. IU, for those who don't know, stands for international units, and it is a different way of saying, you know, a weight or a volume of a particular product. And in vitamin D, they pronounce it in IUs or in micrograms. Now, the IU that you need to be aiming for a maintenance dose is between 4,000 and 6,000. The darker your skin, the higher that figure is. Why? Simply because the skin is darker because of the pigments that color the skin, but that also stops the UV rays getting through the skin. And that's why people of a darker skin coloration will usually struggle to make vitamin D even more than white Caucasian skin types. So make sure that your vitamin D intake is sufficient. Most of the provisions that you can find in the shops are too low. You will find 500, maybe 1,000 IU, but just so you know, 4, 5, even 6,000 IU is very much pretty standard for a maintenance dose. If you are vitamin D deficient and you haven't been taking any vitamin D, let's say since September, then you would do well to take a higher dose at about 10,000 IU for a good week and then drop down to a maintenance dose. What you should find is changes in things like your mood, but also in terms of niggles and aches. It's not that you suddenly will stop having shoulder pain, but more that your general sense of achiness and discomfort will start to ease off quite significantly and quite quickly. So I hope that helps and gives a little bit more information on vitamin D. Thank you, Margaret.
There's
yes, exactly. Do you want to cover that?
Go on.
So the point of ergonomics, Josh, is a very good one because it is both overrated and underrated at the same time, which is a bit weird to say, but actually what it comes down to is that we can do anything other than fly and stay underwater for longer than 5 minutes. We can, we can sit, we can stand, we can stoop, there's nothing wrong with you having a desk where you're doing a little bit of work to the left, a little bit of work to the right. So it's not that we have to be very rigid in our thinking around ergonomics. The problem is simply when we get stuck in the same position for long periods of time. That is the issue. So if you wanted to solve the ergonomic question simply, quickly, and cheaply, put on a timer. Allow yourself to sit in any given position for 20, 25 minutes at a time. But every time that your timer goes off, you have to take on a completely different position and posture. And you'll find that that works just as well. Now, let's say, for example, that that's not possible, that you can't just change position willy-nilly. But in that case, you have a different challenge. And that's where workplace ergonomics really come in, particularly on computer surfaces, but also manual handling surfaces. So that's where we've got to think about the angle of the hip to the knee, like Caroline covered, and then the height and positioning of things like the screen. Or when you're looking at manual handling stations, that the station is high enough that the worker shouldn't have to move a heavier weight too far forwards or too far to the side. So minimizing twisting and turning, because it is true that the combination of bending, stooping, lifting, twisting, and turning is absolutely terrible for all things disc. So in a nutshell, Josh, ergonomics, both overstated and understated at the same time, it just depends on the context within which that person is operating. Jerry mentions also the DWP Access Work-to-Work scheme. Yes, absolutely. DWP have made and shared a lot of incredibly useful tools. There is one little thing that I would say is worth noting there. A lot of those tools are perhaps a little bit crude. Now, they are crude by default, sadly, because we're looking at big data. And at the moment, when you're evaluating with those tools, you're evaluating a workspace, let's say of 50 or 500 people, you will start to see useful data. Now, that said, what you'll then understand is you'll get a sense of the trends about how people relate to the work they're doing, to the workplace, to the company, because a lot of that will actually be filled with, let's call it, subjective feelings as well. So it can be very challenging. But when you're starting to get more granular and you're getting down to the individual person who's having problems or recurrently having problems, then again, you really need to start narrowing down and looking at what is specific for that particular patient, or for that particular employee and person. There is a question by Hillary further up. Sorry, I missed that, Hillary. And Barley, I'll get to both your questions as well. So, Hillary, in terms of fibromyalgia, I'm guessing you're asking a question because you or somebody might have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. Now, fibromyalgia is, in my opinion, badly described both in the literature and by some of the people that deal with this the most, our GPs. And by their own admission, they find it a very frustrating condition to work on, which is a shame, but I can understand why. And the why is because fibromyalgia is technically not actually a physical condition, and neither is it a mental condition, but it is a brain condition. Caroline touched earlier on the notion of pain gating. And pain gating is really the process of giving meaning to a particular sensation. Now, we can all agree when we're looking at, let's say, a white screen or something that is white. But actually, the white you see, the white that I see, the white that Caroline sees are three different whites. We know that for a fact that what you taste, even though we might be eating the same thing, that what we see, what we hear are all different and individual to us. Pain is the same. The pain experience is unique to the person who is experiencing the pain. And to come back to the point about fibromyalgia, is that fibromyalgia is essentially a disorder, if you like, where that the brain gives the sensation of pain earlier than it would do it in somebody else. Meaning, if you think of it that the sensation from a tissue irritation or some damage is traveling up to the brain, and then the brain has to give it meaning, and then it'll decide whether it will call it nothing at all, a little bit of a niggle, or a severe pain. The person with fibromyalgia has an issue with the part of the brain that decides that process, that decides how severe the pain will be called. Yeah. So at that point, the person with fibromyalgia is essentially calling something that most people would call maybe a bit of a niggle. They will experience that as severe pain. Now, to get to your specific question, I have no indication, neither in the literature nor my clinical experience, that vitamin D would help with fibromyalgia, unless the patient is vitamin D deficient, in which case they may find that there is a reduction in the severity of the pain, but that would only be because of a reduction in the inflammatory status of that individual, which would add to their pain experience. So it wouldn't treat the fibromyalgia, but it would treat the inflammatory status, which is made to be felt as worse through the fibromyalgia. I hope that makes sense and that I didn't lose Caroline, I'm looking at you to tell me that that made sense somehow. Yeah. So if that doesn't make sense, Hilary, please feel free to ask further, and I'll try and clarify further. There's a question around frozen shoulder. So yes and no again. True frozen shoulder or adhesive capsulitis is a condition where the capsule around the joint shrinks due to an inflammatory reaction and causes you to be effectively unable to move beyond a certain point. Now, true adhesive capsulitis or frozen shoulder is actually relatively rare. I would say that every 10 patients that tell me they've got frozen shoulder, there's probably only about 1, maybe 2 who actually do. The other ones have things that mimic frozen shoulder. And there are a lot of conditions that will do that, usually associated to the tendons on the top of the shoulder blade and indeed into the neck itself. So there are a lot of people who, when they have their neck and shoulders treated, they will end up feeling a lot better from frozen shoulder, or from what they believe to be frozen shoulder. With true frozen shoulder, it's really a much more involved process than that. There are certain situations where that frozen shoulder problems can be caused by postural issues, and in those cases, indeed, treating neck shoulder posture in general would be very helpful, Bali. So that's where that would make sense. So again, it's one of those yes and no questions. It just depends on what your actual diagnosis is and what the context of that patient is and that individual is. Sorry. So what is the best way to manage foraminal narrowing and tears to cervical discs? Very, very good question, Joanna. Again, it depends, but in a nutshell, it's about creating more space in the foramina. So for those that don't know what the foramen is basically a Latin word for the hole through which the nerve comes out. So the foramens, you have multiple of those at the base of the skull, and then you have also throughout the spinal column all the way down the spinal column itself. And when the foramina narrows, that can be due to something called stenosis. It can be due to repeated inflammation in the area, but it can also be due to a change in the position relatively of one vertebra to another, or actually an increase in tension of muscle mimicking foraminal stenosis or narrowing. So that can happen as well. Now, how we manage it when a patient does come in with intervertebral foramen or IVF stenosis is actually using something called IDD therapy. It's basically a fancy computer-guided rack, and it just increases the motion and the available space in that axis, in the x-axis. And so by increasing the available space between the disc, you can then increase the available space in the foramen as well. Indeed, Bali, bone can be absolutely fantastic. Sports therapy, dry needling. Dry needling, by the way, is the medical version of acupuncture. And all of those things are great tools to effectuate a change in the muscular behavior. So again, it just depends on the actual diagnosis that you were given there, Bali. Joanna, does that answer the question? Caroline, did you want to add anything to the foraminal narrowing and cervical disc tears?
No, that's pretty good. I would have said the same. It's it comes down to the cause again, isn't it? So what is truly causing what is causing that to narrow. So I see that. I'm going to keep you for a second, Stefan. Just eating back. Okay. So, I did it. No, I'll do it. Okay. So yeah, I would have pretty much said the same thing. But I see, Joanne, that you've said so. You've had 2 discs removed and replaced with titanium cage. So that change. Do you have experience with that, Stefan?
With discal surgery, removals and fusions. Yeah. And that is at the more extreme end, where that you basically immobilize the relationship between one vertebra and another, and you bolt it together. So that's what they call a microdiscectomy with a fusion. But you're asking there, Joanna, how do you get the treatment? Yeah, any clinic that provides IDD, there are quite a few around. It's becoming more popular now that people are starting to realize how helpful it can be, but it's not particularly useful as a standalone treatment. So you need a good diagnosis first, and then make sure that any rotation and any other additional problems are actually treated alongside it. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much for the comments. Much appreciated. Fiona, same. Thank you very much, and we will provide all the, oh, Joanna, nerve conduction. Okay, so to drill further on to your question, Joanna, if that's okay with the audience, what is it that is actually pressing onto the nerve rootlet is my question. So is it a disc hernia? Is it inflammatory fluid, or is it a swelling around the nerve rootlet itself? Because you see, there's the hole that the nerve travels through, and then there's the nerve itself. And sometimes it can actually be that the nerve rootlet itself swells and actually gets caught. If it is because the hole itself is becoming tighter and tighter and tighter and stenosing, as we call it, then it becomes a completely different story, and that's really a surgical intervention. So where that the disc is misaligned, as you write there, Joanna, that is something that can be that is much better treatment-wise with IDD. So that works very well for that, and that's really about discs bulging and creating an actual compression of the nerve tissue. So no, I don't agree at all with the just put up with it. Although there is good quality research that says that most disc hernias will resolve within, I think it's a 3 to 6 month period. And if that's the case, then good, that's very fortunate. Most of our patients, however, when they are in that kind of pain, decide that they want to seek help and not wait whether or not it's going to go away by itself. Yes, exactly, Joanna. That this is the 5 years. That's really where we start to look at the bigger context, and there will be a bigger context for sure. Angela would say that setup of stations is more important than expensive ergonomic equipment. Oh, yeah. What has to be understood here? Thank you for that question, Angela. What has to be understood here is that we are providing a rehabilitative service that includes obviously the diagnosis, but it's not true that this is instead of that somehow surgery supersedes that. In fact, we have a very good working relationship with the Coventry Walsgrave Hospital and their neurosurgical department there. They are now sending us all their pre-surgical work to evaluate and do whatever we can before they operate. And the simple reason is that operating is really about doing the carpentry and removing any obstacles to recovery. But if this person is still using their disc incorrectly or using their neck incorrectly, then all that will happen is that a couple of months, a couple of years down the line, it'll just start all over again. So that's what we technically term failed back syndrome. It is a 5-year window that they evaluate what the failed back ratios are. So, for example, there's one particular professor at Walsgrave, the head of neurosurgery, whose failed back syndrome rate has gone down from 50% down to 20%, meaning that up until recently, he was expecting half of the patients that were operated on to relapse within 5 years. Now, having worked together for the last 13 years, he's only expecting to see 1 to 2 out of 10 to relapse in that way. And we do that simply by virtue of they do the carpentry, we make sure that the patient uses their body more correctly. So 3 years, Joanna. But so if you would like to, yes, yeah, by all means, Joanna, email me directly. It'll be a pleasure. So with that, Caroline, is there anything else that you would like to add, or is there anyone else out there? Yes, she is. Hello, Sharon.
Hi.
I hope that was helpful. Is there anything that you would like us to touch on to finish with?
I just want to say thank you so much for the session. The feedback's been amazing. It's still coming in, and I'll send the evaluation link to attendees afterwards, which will include the link to your survey as well. And just thank you for all, for coming. I'm going to stop the recording now. So you're on mute, Stefan.
I think that's Caroline that keeps putting me on mute quite rightly too. No, thank you, Sharon. And I think it's efforts like this, as Caroline mentioned earlier, it's efforts like this that really, enable us to take our expertise out of the office and share with people that care. And it's just lovely to be able to support that. I really do think that because back pain is not. Back pain isn't sexy, is it? This is one of the problems that we have. And realistically, we're only going to fix it through community. We're only going to fix it by suggesting, supporting good, healthy habits. And like Caroline says, we've got plenty of work. We really don't need you all to make additional efforts to break yourself. So do everything you can to stay out of our offices. That is really the motto of it. And if there's anything that we can do to help you do that, we absolutely will. So thank you very much for everyone organizing and attending. It's an absolute pleasure for myself and Caroline.
Yeah, thank you for listening to it.